Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something that touches almost every one of us, yet often feels like a puzzle with missing pieces: money and, the pursuit of financial freedom.
Yeah, it's a big one. If you've ever worried about outliving your savings or just felt totally overwhelmed by how complex the financial system seems, you're definitely not alone.
Not at all. It's a really common anxiety. I
Yeah.
saw a stat recently, something like 75% of Americans actually expect their assets to run out before they die.
Wow. Yeah. And let's face it, Social Security, well, it helps, but it isn't really designed to provide a truly comfortable retirement on its own.
Exactly. So that pervasive feeling that real financial security is just, I don't know, out of reach for most people, that's a
Yeah.
huge barrier.
And that's the barrier we want to try and break down today.
Absolutely. Our mission for this deep dive is basically to cut through all the noise and uncover the, well, surprisingly simple but really powerful strategies that the world's most successful investors and financial minds use.
Right. We've waded through a ton of sources, interviews, research, you name it, to kind of distill the practical, actionable insights for you.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe. A way to get well informed and feel empowered about your financial life without having to read, 700 books yourself.
Which someone actually did. This whole exploration, it really got a kickstart for us during the financial crisis. That period made everyone reevaluate what truly matters, right? Financially and just, well, in life.
For sure.
And it spurred one person who'd actually experienced homelessness to just obsessively read everything, searching for those life-changing financial strategies.
And what we found, time and again, is that success leaves clues. So our goal here is to show you how ordinary people can absolutely start thinking like the 0.001%.
Okay, so let's set the stage a bit. We talk about retirement like it's always been a thing, but it's actually pretty new, isn't it?
Yeah, really only a generation or two old for most families. Before that, people mostly just worked until they couldn't.
Precisely. And knowing that history is kind of important because the financial world has changed so dramatically. We've gone from guaranteed pensions where your employer handled most of the risk to these incredibly complex systems.
Little with these, right?
Totally. And placing all the burden of planning squarely on you, the individual. It's like suddenly being asked to be your own expert investment manager, which is frankly a huge ask.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Oscar Wilde quote, an expert is an ordinary man away from home giving advice.
Aha! That's good. And so true for money. Everyone seems to have an opinion, a hot tip.
But finding advice that's actually proven, based on real results, that's the challenge.
That's a core problem, distinguishing the talkers from the walkers. You get pundits pushing theories they've never tested themselves.
Like a coach who's never played the game.
Exactly. We're just bombarded with conflicting info, marketing hype. It's easy to get overwhelmed and just sort of hope for the best, let things drift.
It's also fascinating how easily our own brains can trick us, even with simple stuff. I remember reading about visual illusions,
Oh, yeah.
where two lines are the same length, but one still looks longer. Your intuition just gets it wrong.
Right. Consistently wrong.
So if we make those kinds of predictable errors with vision, what about complex things like finance?
Exactly. Our intuition fails us. Think about that organ donor example, Denmark versus Sweden.
Oh, right. Tell that one.
Okay, so in Denmark, the form said, check here if you want to participate. Only about 4% did.
Okay.
In Sweden, the form said, check here if you don't want to participate. Over 99% participated.
Wow. So it wasn't about generosity. It was just the default.
Purely the power of the default setting, human inertia. We tend not to act.
That's incredible. Such a small thing, huge impact. It really nails Ray Dalio's point, doesn't it? Complexity is the enemy of execution.
It really does.
Yeah.
If you want to succeed, you have to simplify.
And Dalio, this guy built one of the most successful hedge funds ever. He always stresses asking, what don't I know?
Yeah, know your limitations. Adapt. Protect yourself. If you don't know what you don't know, you're going to get hurt. So our goal is to give you a clear, simple plan to avoid those blind spots.
Okay, simplicity. But in finance, that often feels like the hardest thing to achieve. So, from all the sources, what's the absolute first non-negotiable step for building financial freedom?
The foundation, and this actually uses that inertia we talked about, is deciding on a fixed percentage of your income to save and invest. Then you automate it.
Automate, before it even hits your bank account.
Exactly. This is your freedom fund. Make it automatic. Think of it like a tax you pay to your future self, but one you actually get to keep.
You're leveraging your own psychology there.
Precisely. Make it the default, and wealth building becomes effortless, almost.
Okay, sounds simple. But does it really work for, regular people, not just high earners?
Oh, absolutely. Look at Theodore Johnson, started at UPS back in 1924, never made more than, I think, $14,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
But he was disciplined. Consistently saved 20% of every single paycheck, every Christmas bonus, put it into company stock,
Yeah.
became incredibly wealthy just through sheer consistency. Automating that 20%, it shows steady action beats high income many times over.
That's incredibly inspiring. And it leads right into the next piece, the miracle power of compounding, doesn't it?
Yes, we hear about it, but we often underestimate just how powerful it is.
Like that story of the two brothers.
Exactly. The one who started saving sooner, even though he put in less money overall, ended up with something like 600% more than his brother who started later but saved more each year.
That's 100%.
Yeah. The key takeaway is start now. It doesn't matter how old you are. The sooner you start, the more compounding works its magic for you. You become an owner, not just a consumer.
Okay, so you've automated your savings, your freedom fund is growing. Now you step into what Dalio called the investment jumble.
Right. And it's full of traps. Marketing myths, some call them investment lies, basically designed to separate you from your money.
What's the biggest trap we found?
Well, one of the absolute biggest culprits is mutual fund fees. They advertise maybe a 1% fee.
Which sounds small.
Right. But that's often just the tip of the iceberg. There can be more than 10 other potential costs hidden in there.
10.
Yeah. Little percentages here and there, 1.3%, 1.44%, just silently eating away at your returns like termites.
Okay, so what does that add up to?
Studies show these fees can devour up to 60% of your potential returns over your investing lifetime.
60%, that's huge.
It's massive. We're talking potentially $250,000 to $450,000. Minimum loss to fees. It's all documented.
And it gets even worse, right? Because the returns they report aren't always what you actually get.
Oh, absolutely. That's another layer of deception. They use time-weighted returns for advertising. Think of it as the best-case scenario, what the fund could have earned under ideal conditions.
Okay.
But what you actually experience, what ends up in your pocket, is the dollar-weighted return. And that's often much, much lower because of the timing of your investments and, again, those fees.
So it's like putting lipstick on a pig, as that old Schwab ad said.
Exactly like that. They paint a rosy picture, but the reality for the investor is often quite different. Most people are just kept in the dark, frankly, overwhelmed.
So even if you're doing the right thing, like putting money into your company 401k to get the match, you could still be getting hammered by these costs.
You absolutely could. Many 401k plans, despite being so common, are kind of disastrous fee-wise. The average plan administrator charges somewhere between 1.3% and 1.5% a year.
On top of the fund fees?
On top of the mutual fund fees within the plan. So your total annual drag could easily top 4%, maybe even 5% per year.
Which can make a supposedly tax-advantaged account more expensive than a regular taxable one.
It can, yes. Plus, you've got hidden transaction costs inside the funds themselves, averaging another 1.44% for U.S. stock funds that often aren't clearly disclosed. It's a huge drain over decades.
This sounds like a complete minefield. Okay, so given all this, hidden costs, conflicts of interest, how do you find someone who's actually on your side? Is there a way through the fog?
There is, and this is maybe one of the most critical pieces of advice. Find a fiduciary.
A fiduciary? Okay, what does that mean practically?
A fiduciary isn't just any advisor. They are legally bound to put your best financial interests first, always. Ahead of their own, ahead of their firm's.
Like a doctor's oath, but for finance.
Kind of, yeah. It's a very different standard than a typical broker who often works for a big company and might be incentivized, paid commissions to sell you specific products.
Products that might not be the absolute best for me, just good for the broker's bottom line.
Exactly. That conflict of interest is built in for many non-fiduciaries.
So how do you spot a true fiduciary? What should you look for?
You generally want someone who's compensated based on a transparent percentage of the assets they manage for you, not someone earning commissions by selling you stuff. An independent registered investment advisor, or RIA, often fits this bill.
Any resources to find one?
Yeah, organizations like NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, have directories of fee-only fiduciaries. And models like the one Elliott Weiss-Bluth created with Hightower are specifically designed to eliminate those conflicts.
And what about checking my own 401k?
There are tools now, like America's Best 401k Fee Checker, that can help you analyze the fees in your company plan. Just knowing your fees is the first step. It could save you hundreds of thousands, maybe millions over your lifetime.
That's incredibly powerful.
Oh,
Okay, beyond managing fees, what about taxes? Any key strategies that successful use to keep more of what they earn?
definitely. For most people, Roth IRAs are great. You pay tax now, but the growth and withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. Good if you think taxes might be higher later.
Makes sense. What about business owners?
For high-income business owners, there's a really powerful tool called a cash balance plan.
Cash balance plan.
Yeah, think of it like a supercharged pension plan you set up for yourself and potentially your employees. It allows for much, much larger tax-deductible contributions than a standard 401k or SEP IRA.
So you reduce your current taxes significantly while boosting retirement savings.
Exactly. It's a way to shelter a lot more income, tax-deferred. Many Fortune 100 companies use similar structures. It's a big advantage if you qualify.
Okay, fascinating. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the absolute masters of the investing game. We're talking legends, right? Carl Icahn, Jack Bogle, Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio.
T. Boone Pickens, Sir John Templeton.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Titans.
What were the most surprising, maybe actionable insights you pulled from their playbooks?
Well, one of the most fundamental game changers came from Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard. His big idea back in the 70s was the low-cost index fund.
Which people initially laughed at, right? Bogle's folly.
They did, called it un-American even.
Right.
But his logic was just impeccable. He said, look, investors as a group are the market. You can't all beat the market.
Because you are the market.
Exactly. So if you just buy the whole market through a low-cost index fund, you're guaranteed to capture the market's return. And because your costs are minimal, you'll almost certainly outperform the average actively managed fund over time.
Especially after you factor in their high fees and this survivorship bias thing.
Precisely. Survivorship bias is where poorly performing funds just get shut down or merged away, so they disappear from the statistics. It makes the average reported return of active funds look better than it really is for the typical investor.
And the actual impact of fees versus indexing is staggering.
It really is. Bogle showed that with active management, due to costs, you might put up 100% of the capital, take 100% of the risk, but maybe only get 30% of the market's long-term reward.
Only 30%.
With indexing, you get close to 100% of the market's return. That's why even Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest stock picker ever, consistently recommends low-cost index funds for most people.
Didn't he make a bet on that?
He did. A famous $1 million wager pitting the S&P 500 index against a basket of hedge funds over 10 years. And the index fund won, handily.
Wow. Okay, so Bogle says be the market, cheaply. But Ray Dalio offers a different approach, more about shielding yourself from market storms. Tell us about his all-weather portfolio.
Right. Dalio comes from a place of humility. He basically says, I know I'm going to be wrong about predicting the future. Markets are unpredictable.
So how do you deal with that?
His solution is the all-weather strategy. It's about building a portfolio that can perform reasonably well, or at least not get crushed, no matter what the economic season is, whether we have rising growth, rising inflation, or falling inflation.
So it's not about predicting, it's about balance.
Exactly. It uses a specific mix of assets, different types of bonds, commodities, stocks, designed to balance each other out across those four scenarios. The goal isn't maximum return in any one environment, but steady performance across all of them.
Yeah, the track record.
It's pretty remarkable. Historically, it's averaged nearly 10% per year after fees, and it made money something like 86% of the time.
But the real test is downside protection,
Yeah.
like in a crash.
That's where it really shines. In 2008, when the S&P 500 tanked, down 37%.
Yeah.
The all-weather model was down less than 4%, just under 4%.
Incredible, compared to a typical 50-50 stock bond mix.
Which sounds balanced, but Dalio points out that in a 50-50 portfolio, usually about 95% of the actual risk comes from the stock side because stocks are so much more volatile than bonds. The all-weather portfolio aims for true risk balance.
That makes so much sense. It seems risk management is a huge theme. What about Paul Tudor Jones, famous for, 28 straight profitable years?
Yeah, an amazing streak. And his core question, his driving principle, is almost primal. How do I keep from losing everything? Preservation of capital is number one.
So how does he do that? Complex algorithms?
Sometimes, but he also relies on surprisingly simple rules, like the 200-day moving average for market timing. If a market or asset falls below its 200-day average price, it's a signal for him to get defensive, maybe get out, cut losses quickly.
It's about defense first.
Absolutely. He stresses you don't even need to be right most of the time to win big. If you manage your risk tightly, cut your losses small, you could be right only, say, 1 out of 5 times, but still make a fortune because your winners are much bigger than your losers.
That's so counterintuitive to how most people think about investing. Speaking of counterintuitive, J. Kyle Bass, the guy who made a killing betting against the housing bubble.
Turned $30 million into $2 billion, yeah.
But didn't he make another, much quirkier investment that shows how these guys think differently?
Oh, the nickels, yes. He looks for what he calls asymmetric trades, where the potential upside is huge compared to a small downside risk, often in overlooked places.
So nickels.
He bought $2 million worth of U.S. nickels. Why? Because at the time, the actual metal in the copper and nickel alloy was worth about 6.8 cents.
No, then its face value of 5 cents.
Exactly. And it cost the government nearly 9 cents to produce each one. He saw that as fundamentally unsustainable, just like they had to change the composition of the penny back in the 80s when copper got too expensive.
So he was betting the composition would have to change, making the old nickels more valuable.
Essentially, yes. Or just holding an asset whose intrinsic value exceeded its face value. It's about spotting those subtle cracks, those inefficiencies in the system that most people ignore.
What a fascinating example. It really shows a different way of looking for value. Now, shifting from specific assets to market psychology, Sir John Templeton had a famous philosophy.
Templeton, the master of contrarianism. His core advice was to buy at the point of maximum pessimism.
When everyone else is terrified and selling.
Exactly. When blood is in the streets, that's when bargains are greatest. And conversely, sell at the point of maximum optimism or euphoria when everyone thinks things can only go up.
He had that quote about market cycles.
Bull markets are born on pessimism, grow on skepticism, mature on optimism, and die on euphoria. It's all about understanding that mass psychology drives markets just as much, if not more, than fundamentals in the short term.
It's amazing how diverse their strategies are: indexing, risk parity, trend following, deep value, contrarian. But what's the surprising thread that seemed to tie almost all these highly successful individuals together beyond just making money?
You know, what really stood out across the board was their profound commitment to contribution, to giving back.
Really? Even the hard-charging ones like I can.
Yes, in different ways, but consistently, whether it's creating foundations, funding medical research, supporting education, mentoring others. They embody that Winston Churchill idea. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give.
That's powerful.
It suggests that maybe achieving that level of success opens up a desire or perhaps a perceived responsibility to contribute beyond oneself, that true fulfillment isn't just accumulation.
That's an incredible insight, kind of a North Star. Okay, let's bring it back to structuring our own finances. David Swenson, the legendary manager of the Yale Endowment.
Grew it from $1 billion to over $23 billion, yeah. An incredible record.
He identified 3 key tools for financial success. What were they?
He broke it down into asset allocation, market timing, and security selection.
And which one did he say was most important?
By far, asset allocation. Deciding how you divide your money between broad categories like stocks, bonds, real estate, etc. He argued it accounts for more than 100% of investing returns.
More than 100%. How does that work?
Because the other two, trying to time the market perfectly or pick individual winning stocks, often end up costing you money through fees, taxes, and just plain mistakes. So getting the allocation right is not just the biggest positive contributor, it helps you avoid the negatives. It's the absolute foundation.
Okay, so if asset allocation is king, how do we actually do it? Our sources talked about a really practical 3 buckets approach. Can you break that down?
Yeah, this is a great framework for organizing your wealth. Bucket number 1 is your security peace of mind bucket.
Security bucket, okay.
This holds the money you absolutely cannot afford to lose. It's for certainty, covering your basic needs, protecting you from shocks. Think very low-risk protected investments.
Like what specifically?
Things like U.S. Treasury bonds, especially TPS Treasury inflation-protected securities, which guard against inflation. Maybe some principal-protected instruments like market-linked CDs, which are FDIC insured but can give you some market upside. One example yielded 8% in 2008 while still guaranteeing principal.
Wow, 8% in 2008 with protection.
Yeah. You might also include certain high-quality secured loans, like those backed by residential real estate with a strong loan-to-value ratio. The key is safety and predictability.
Got it. Unshakable foundation. What's bucket number 2?
Bucket 2 is your risk growth bucket. This is where you aim for higher returns. Stocks, maybe certain types of real estate, alternative investments. But, and this is crucial, you only put money here that you could potentially afford to lose if things go wrong, or you ensure you have protective measures.
Because this is where people can get burned if they're not careful.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in a hot market, tech stocks, crypto, a real estate boom, and forget the risk. We heard that story about Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, the guy who
Yeah.
sold his company for $150 million.
Made a fortune, then plowed almost all of it into booming Las Vegas real estate right before the crash. Lost nearly everything because he didn't diversify, didn't keep enough in his security bucket. A painful lesson in not getting seduced by growth alone.
Yikes. A stark reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, and bucket number 3.
Bucket 3 is the dream bucket. This is for fun, for your aspirational goals. Maybe it's that dream vacation home, starting a foundation, taking flying lessons, whatever really excites you.
And the key here is realizing maybe those dreams aren't as impossibly far off as they seem.
Right. We talked about how our brains struggle with large numbers, like a billion seconds ago was 1992, roughly. But a trillion seconds ago, that was 30,000 BC.
Whoa.
We just can't grasp the scale. So that dream lifestyle, like owning a small Fiji island, might actually cost way less than you intuitively think compared to, say, the national debt. Define the dream, quantify it, and it might become achievable.
That's a fantastic perspective shift. Okay, let's tackle the number 1 fear, especially for boomers, but increasingly for millennials too. Outliving your savings. How do you create that guaranteed income stream for life, like a personal pension?
This is where certain types of annuities can play a really valuable role. Now, you have to be careful.
Right, because annuities often get a bad rap for high fees.
Exactly. Especially variable annuities, which are often complex and loaded with costs that can eat up your returns. Those are generally ones to avoid or scrutinize very, very carefully.
So what kind are potentially useful?
We're talking about simpler, well-structured income annuities, sometimes called fixed-indexed annuities, or just straightforward, immediate, or deferred income annuities. They basically allow you to convert a lump sum of your savings into a guaranteed paycheck for life, no matter how long you live.
So it directly addresses that fear of running out of money.
Precisely. It acts like a pension you buy for yourself. Some experts, like Dr. Jeffrey Brown, who advises the U.S. Treasury, see them as a critical part of a secure retirement income plan. They call them the Holy Grail for retirement income because they solve that longevity risk problem.
Okay, interesting. And for people looking to speed things up, maybe high-income earners, there was that secret of the affluent tool kind of.
Yes, private placement life insurance, or PPLI.
Sounds complicated.
It can be, and it's generally for accredited investors due to complexity and cost, but the concept is powerful. It essentially allows you to hold investments inside a life insurance structure.
Why would you do that?
The magic is in the tax treatment. Your investments grow tax-deferred, just like in a 401k. But crucially, with a properly structured PPLI, you can often access that growth later completely tax-free, usually through policy loans.
Tax-free growth and tax-free access.
Under current law, yes. It basically allows you to sidestep capital gains and income taxes on your investment returns within the policy. This can dramatically accelerate wealth accumulation. You might reach your goals in half the time or double your spendable income in retirement because it's not being taxed away.
Wow, that sounds like a massive advantage if you qualify. Okay, so we've covered strategies, titans, structures, but the sources emphasize the final hurdle often isn't external, right? It's us.
That's absolutely right. The biggest obstacle is often our own psychology. Real transformation, lasting change, it doesn't usually happen gradually. It happens in a moment. That aha, or that's it, moment when you truly decide to change.
Yeah, 3 things make the difference.
Yes. Your state, your story, and your strategy. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if your mental and emotional state is fearful or scarcity-minded, you won't implement it. Or if your internal story about money, what you believe is possible for you, is limited, that will cap your results. You need all 3 aligned.
So money isn't just money. It's almost a mirror.
In many ways, yes. It reflects your creativity, your focus, your ability to add value, your discipline, even your beliefs about yourself and the world.
Like that contrast between Adolf Merkel and Chuck Feeney.
Exactly. Merkel, a German billionaire, lost a fortune in the crisis, became consumed by it, clung desperately to every penny, and tragically took his own life. Chuck Feeney, co-founder of duty-free shoppers, made billions and then systematically, joyfully gave it all away while he was still alive, ending up living happily in a rented apartment.
2 billionaires, Wildly different relationships with money and vastly different outcomes in terms of fulfillment.
It highlights that internal state and story. Feeney's story was about contribution.
And that giving aspect, contribution, keeps coming up.
It connects to what some call the sixth core human need, contribution. Beyond our own needs, we have a deep need to contribute to something larger than ourselves. As the saying goes, the secret to living is giving.
True meaning comes from that.
That seems to be the message from many truly fulfilled people. It's not just what you get, but who you become and what you contribute. Remember that story about the richest man in Canada at Cirque du Soleil?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
He was there, incredibly wealthy, but his health was so poor he was apparently miserable and couldn't even enjoy the amazing show right in front of him. It's a reminder that financial wealth without health, without connection, without meaning, it's kind of empty. You need holistic well-being.
So mastering the internal world is key. Any simple daily practice people can use to start shifting that mindset.
One of the most powerful and simplest is gratitude. Just taking, say, 10 minutes each morning to actively focus on what you're genuinely grateful for, big things, small things, doesn't matter.
How's that helped?
It primes your brain. You literally cannot feel angry or fearful while you are feeling truly grateful. They're incompatible states. It shifts your physiology, your focus, opens you up to possibility and abundance instead of lack. Simple, but powerful. Now, on the flip side, can money actually buy happiness? The old saying is no, but what does recent research suggest?
It's nuanced. Just having more money doesn't automatically equal more happiness beyond a certain point where basic needs are met. But studies do show that how you spend money can significantly impact happiness.
Why so?
Spending money on experiences rather than just stuff tends to bring more lasting joy. And interestingly, spending money on others, even small amounts like buying a coffee for a friend or donating $5 to a cause you believe in, consistently boosts happiness more than spending that same amount on yourself.
So it's about deploying money in meaningful ways.
Exactly. Its power lies in how we choose to use it, often in ways that connect us or align with our values.
This actually brings us to a pretty optimistic conclusion, looking at the future. How does technology tie into all this, potentially enabling more freedom and well-being?
Well, technology is progressing at an exponential rate and is starting to tackle some of humanity's biggest scarcity challenges.
Like what? Things like clean water. Dean Kamen's slingshot machine can purify almost any water source using minimal energy. Abundant, healthy food, look at vertical farming, using a fraction of the land and water, or advancements in clean, lab-grown meat that could revolutionize protein production. Even health and aging are being addressed by technology in new ways.
So technology is driving down costs and increasing access.
Massively. And it empowers individuals. Think about Easton LaChapelle.
The young guy who made the robotic hand.
Yeah, he designed an advanced prosthetic hand and then open-sourced the designs, put them online so anyone with a 3D printer could make one for a few $100s instead of tens of thousands.
That's incredible. It democratizes creation.
Exactly. It shifts us from just being consumers to potentially being creators. If technology keeps making things cheaper and more capable, extraordinary lifestyles might become accessible for far less money than we imagine.
Wow, what a journey we've covered today. We started with those common anxieties about money, looked at the shifting retirement landscape, exposed the jungle of hidden fees.
Then we dove into the playbooks of investing legends like Bogle, Dalio, Tudor Jones, finding wisdom in their different approaches, but also that common thread of contribution.
Right. And we got practical with frameworks like the 3 buckets, planning for lifetime income, understanding tools like PPLI.
And finally, tying it all together with the internal game, the importance of your state, your story, gratitude, and realizing money's true power might be in how we use it to connect and contribute.
It really feels like this deep dive provides a blueprint, doesn't it? Not just for managing money today, but really for thinking about your financial life differently, closing that gap between where you are and where you want to be.
Absolutely. It's about arming yourself with knowledge, but also with the right mindset.
So as we wrap up, here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on. If technology is constantly driving down the cost of things, while radically expanding what's possible, making amazing lifestyles potentially more accessible, what then becomes the real scarcity in our lives? Is it still money? Or is it something else like time, focus, meaning, connection? And how can we use these financial insights to invest more wisely in whatever that true scarcity is for us?
That's definitely some food for thought. Until next time.